Hi, I'm Leanne from BatLadyHerbals, and welcome to my video. Today I wanted to bring you to a wonderful and fairly infamous park here in Central Florida of the Big Tree Park, former home of the largest tree in Central Florida called the Senator. Unfortunately, a few years ago he did get burnt down in an accident. However, there are plenty of amazing cypresses around here. However, the plant that I wanted to introduce you to today is not a cypress. In fact, it's a plant that you might even have in your backyard, and it likes to grow along walkways and pretty much anywhere where there's humans. The dwarf plantain, or Plantago Virginica. So this is our native plantain that you can find here in Florida. There's a couple others that you can find as well, but this is the most common one. Now, plantain has a habit of growing where people are. It likes to be by roadsides, in lawns, and in the little strips of land between buildings and like businesses and homes. As a matter of fact, it likes to be where people are so much that several cultures throughout the ages have given it nicknames. The ancient Vikings used to call it wayfarer's plant or wayfarer's weed because it liked to grow by the waysides of all the roads. And the Native Americans called it white man's foot because everywhere a white person put their foot, one of these seemed to sprout up. Now, this plantain is one that a lot of people might argue with because it is one of the smallest plantains in the Plantago genus. It also has a little grayish cast to the green leaves, is fuzzy, and it has these serrations on it. The most common plantain people use is Plantago major, which is the broadleaf plantain, and it doesn't have any of that. It's smooth edges. It's also got a slightly different shaped leaf, and it's much bigger. As a matter of fact, the broadleaf plantain has a tendency to grow this tall on relatively regular basis. However, it is undeniably a plantain if you know how to look for plantain in the wild. Now, what you do, it looks like it is a monocot. It's really a dicot. The reason it looks like a monocot is because it has these parallel veins along the leaf. And that's a tendency of monocots to grow. However, what monocot means is that it has one leaf when it sprouts as a seedling. And dicots have two. And this plant has two leaves when it sprouts as a seedling. So if you catch it young enough and you see a seedling that has two leaves with parallel veins like a monocot should have, there's a good chance it's going to turn into a plantain. Now, as it gets older, it's going to keep the parallel veins. But one of the other things about the parallel veins is that when you pick it, if you break it open a little bit, you can see these fine fibers. They're kind of elastic, and they're coming out of those veins. And if you keep going, you'll eventually break it or pull it out. But they do have some stretch to them. And that's another identifying feature of plantain. And then, of course, once it puts to flower and seed, you have these lovely seed spikes. Now, this plant is edible. The leaves and the seeds are considered to be highly nutritious. The leaves have a high fiber and mineral content, but the seeds are full of mucilage, which is a type of fiber, but they're also full of psyllium, which is another type of fiber. So a lot of cultures will use the seeds from this plant to help with your digestion. But another thing fiber does is it helps to kind of scrub out your arteries, helping to get rid of the plaque and things that might be clogging them, causing coronary issues. However, what this plant is most well known for is its wound care properties. Not only is it in generally good for your skin, but it's also astringent, which will help to actually speed the closing and healing of wounds. But it's also a classification of herbs we consider to be drawing herbs, herbs that draw things out of the body. So if you have a bee sting or a splinter, or if you have a sore that has some pus in it, if you use the fresh leaf on that spot, it will eventually help draw those things out so that you don't have to dig around and do too much extra damage in your attempt to help speed the healing. Now, it's also a great herb for burns. And so what you do whenever you're working on trying to deal with a wound, pull out a splinter, things like that, you actually want to take the leaf and make a spit poultice. By chewing it up and sticking it on the wound. And then you want to cover it and let it sit. In most cases with splinters and bee stings, it'll draw out the sting or the splinter in about 30 minutes to an hour, or at least get it close enough to where you don't need to dig around in it with a needle. The same process can be used when you're dealing with burns, cuts. Now, if you're dealing with a stab wound or a deep wound, you don't want to put something like this on it at the beginning of the process of healing, because closing the surface of the wound while leaving the depth of the wound to heal on its own is going to cause problems of its own. But towards the end of the healing process, when those depths of that wound have been begun to heal a little bit better, then you can certainly move to Plantain and help finish that closing process. And you can do that with a spit poultice. You can do that also with a combination poultice with other herbs as well. Now, it's a great herb internally as well. I mentioned that the seeds have mucilage, but the leaves have a little bit of mucilage too. And anything that has mucilage is going to be slightly demulcent, which basically means that it helps to soothe your digestive tract and it helps to act as a mucous membrane tonic. So if you have any kind of irritation in your throat, in your stomach, in some cases ulcers, it'll even help. You can drink a tea made from it, you can eat the leaves raw, and get all those benefits down in your system. So another reason that this is a great herb for your wounds and skin and burns and things is because it is antimicrobial, which means that it helps actively fight infections. So it'll help prevent the wound from getting infected while it's healing. But because it has that mucilage and demulcent property, it is also a really good soothing plant for skin conditions such as eczema. And if you add in the properties of it drawing out pus from infected wounds and things like that, that also makes it a really great herb for acne. So especially people who have problems with really bad acne are going to see a lot of benefit from using this plant. In addition to this plant being a great herb as a mucous membrane tonic, it's also good for your digestive system in other ways. The mineral content makes it a wonderful antacid. It also is a diuretic, which helps to detoxify your system, making it great for your kidneys and your liver. Now, it's also a lymphatic mover, and your lymphatic system is kind of like a secondary circulation system in your body. There's fluid all over your body, lymphatic fluid, but it doesn't have a pump like your circulatory system does. So you need to do things to help keep it moving. This is why exercise is important and why certain herbs can help immensely. And if you don't know, the lymphatic system helps to move your immune system all throughout your body. So your lymphatic system health is important to your immune health. Now, this plant will help to move it along, keeping everything going and keeping your immune system and your lymphatic system healthy. It's also a great tonic for your connective tissues. So anyone who has problems with your ligaments, with your tendons, this is a great plant to add into your routine. Now, if you're looking at harvesting this as food, I do want to let you know that this species of plantain in particular, as it goes through its life cycle, it gets more and more fibrous, which makes it more and more tough. If you want to eat the leaves raw, I recommend harvesting them before it gets these little spikes, the flower spikes. Because once it does, you probably have to cook it down to remove some of the bitterness and some of the fibrosity. Make it a little bit more palatable that way. One of the other things that it's used for a lot here is issues with your gums, especially gums that are inflamed, swollen, bleeding. It's great for that. It also is really good taken long term for chronic inflammation, especially in the mucosa, which is pretty much anywhere from your stomach down to your butt. Your entire GI tract is lined with mucosa, and this herb is great to help reduce the inflammation of it and to help speed any healing of any irritants that might have popped up to cause that inflammation. Another good long-term use, it's a mild expectorant, and so it's actually really good to use for irritating coughs and in cases of mild bronchitis that just keeps lingering. So it will help soothe the throat while helping to get all the stuff out of your chest. Also here in the West, this herb is safe for all ages. So this is a great herb to start out with kids, and it's a great herb to call for when you have a sick child. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this species is local and native to Florida and the whole Southeast. There are species of this plant pretty much throughout the world, and there's even species that they use in traditional Chinese medicine. In the TCM modalities, they consider this plant to be sweet and cooling. In the Western modalities, it has a little bit more of a bitter tint to it. The flavors in Western herbalism are considered to be kind of bland with a little hint of sweetness and a bitter aftertaste. Now, anything bitter is going to help with your digestive system in both of these modalities. But in the traditional Chinese system, it's often the seed that gets used above the leaf, whereas in Western herbalism, we tend to use the leaf more than the seed. And so there are some differences in how it is used and what it's used for. In the Chinese system, the seeds are usually used for the mucilage quality and its ability to help with your digestion. Whereas in the Western system, we tend to use it more for our skin. But it is useful in both of these ways. It's also a great cardiac herb. Like I mentioned earlier, it has a lot of fiber in it, and it helps to tone your cardiac system and help keep that healthy. With it being a cooling herb in TCM, it also is known to affect damp heat by clearing it. And with the clearing of damp heat, it is very useful for issues of diarrhea and edema, as well as sexual dysfunction. So thank you again for joining me. My name is Leanne from BatLadyHerbals. If you like what I do and would like to support the channel, feel free to find me on Patreon. Put the link to that down below. If you like this video, please subscribe and like and hit that notification bell. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. You can also find my herbal blog at BatLadyHerbals.com. Feel free to follow me on social media as I go throughout Central Florida and explore and find plants. And also, I have a shop on Teespring where you can find all kinds of shirts and other merchandise. Feel free to shop around there, and links to all this will be down below. Now, if you're curious about what nature might have for you in your own backyard, you can always email me, contact me about backyard tours, and that email address will be down below. So thank you again, and have a wonderful day. dwarf plantain, or Plantago Virginica. The dwarf plantain, or Plantago Virginica. I did it. I'm doing the wrong Virginia. Darn it. Why does Latin have to have so many Virginias?